So today we will build a patch from scratch using the VCV Drums collection. This might be a longer video than usual, but you can find timestamp links in the description and skip around to the parts you find interesting. And let's get right into this. As always, I have the impromptu clocked module, the mind meld mixer with the send effects expander. I have here, of course, the lovely plateau as a send reverb, and I will use also color coding, so maybe it will be easier to follow. And we will start with the kick drum pattern. For this, we will use the gate sequencer from impromptu. Right, we will go with the BPM of 127 on the clock, and I will use a multiplied by 4 clock to drive the sequencer and also use the reset. Right now, a multiplied by 4 clock will give us a resolution of 16th notes, and we can already use the kick drum module. Right, I will use the first row to trigger it. Triggers and clocks will be blue. Right, this will go already to the mixer. Audio will be red. And then let's sequence a pattern. We will go with step, let's say 1, 4, 11, and 13. Right, now the kick module is also an accent input. Right, so we can use the second row for this. Again, this will be blue. Right, and let's go with steps 1 and 11. Right, so now we have also accented hits. Maybe take the decay a bit down. Right, something like this. We can name this kick. Right, and now let's add some movement to this with a delay. I will use the tap dancer delay from flag, set the tempo again to 127 BPM. And in this case, I will use a copy of the kick, right? So just another cable from the kick. This can already go to the mixer. It will get loud for a second. Right, and now I'll take the mix all the way up, because again, we have already the dry signal going to a dedicated channel of its own. Right, we don't need the dry channel twice. And I can add also ducking. So now the delayed signal will be ducked by the kick drum. Add some high pass filtering. Add some drive to the input. Very nice. Maybe add a bit of reverb. Right, something like this. We can call this kick delay. Right, so we have a kick pattern with some movement. I will mute this for a second. Okay, now I'm going to do something a bit weird, and that's adding some processing to the main output. Now, the reason for this is, first of all, I would like to affect the sound a bit, and all of the decisions we will make from now on, if it's adding voices, adding effects, changing parameters, will be with this processing in mind. So we will use distortion, and we will use a compressor. And you can experiment with having the distortion before or after the compressor. I would like to have it in this case before the compressor, so changes in dynamics will affect the result. Right, so I will disconnect the main output, and instead it will go first to the distortion, then to the compressor, and then back to the output. Right, now I will unmute what we have until now. Right, and now change the model of the distortion. I like the OJD. Turn off the filtering. Right, add some drive. Add some feedback. Oh yeah. Right, maybe I can already take the level here a bit down. Right, and now let's lower the attack a bit on the compressor, not too much. We want something that will stay snappy, so not so much, but the release we can take a bit lower. And then start lowering the threshold. Something like this. Right, so now we color the sound a bit and we can continue working on the patch. Now before we add a bass to this, let's go with the hi-hat. I will use the closed hi-hat module, this one here, the C-hat. Right, we will use the third row of the gate sequencer. Again, this will be blue to trigger it. This can already go to the mixer. Right, and now let's go with steps, let's say 3 and 7 and 10 and 14. Right, make it a bit more snappy. Something like this. We can again use the accents with the lower row here. Right, and let's set just the first one, step 3. Take the accent down. Right, something like this. Also here we can add some delay to add movement. We will again do this in parallel, you will see soon enough also why. And in this case I will use Prince of Perception, also from Flag. Again I will use a copy of the hi-hat. This will go to the mixer. Again, mix all the way up. We have already the dry signal. We can sync this with the clock. Go with dotted eighth. Yes. And also here I can use the kick to duck the delay. Here we have the duck option and we have an input here. This is an audio input we can use with external audio. So again, I will use the kick. So we have even more movement. Right, we can add a sort of a bandpass filter with the built-in filter here. If I take this to about the center. Right, we can add some movement here. So for this, I will use the sample and hold from Bog Audio. I will use the same multiplied by 4 clock to trigger it, and this will by default trigger both sections. Right, so now we can change the range in the right-click menu to, let's say, something like negative, positive 5 volts, and use it once to modulate the position of the bandpass filter, and once depending on this mixer. Right, this is also why I wanted to use a different channel so I can modulate the panning of just this delay signal. Right, we can have once hats and once hat delay. Right, so we have even more movement. One more thing I want to do before we continue is to add some variation to the sequence after 4 bars and after 8 bars. So what I will do, I will copy this sequence. Right, I have it set here to all, so it will copy all of the steps. Right, so I hit copy, I go to sequence 2, I hit paste, so we have now the same sequence. Right, what I will do in this case, I will add just one more step for the kick. This will be the last one, step 16. Right, again, copy this, send or paste this to another channel, another slot. Right, and then what I will do, I will remove step 4, add step 5, and add step 9. Right, so we have another variation. Let's go back to sequence 1. This was the original sequence. Now I can change its play mode. If I click here twice, now it's on forward. I can change this to forward but 3, which means that now if I go to song mode, I can now chain a few sequences, and sequence 1 will always play 3 times. So again, I have in this case a length of 4 steps of this chaining of this song. Step 1 will be sequence 1 that will play 3 times. Then we have step 2 will be sequence 2. Step 3 will play 3 times sequence 1, and then the last step will be sequence 3. Right, so we have 1 1 1 2, 1 1 1 3. And we have variation after 4 bars and even a bigger variation after 8 bars. right? One. Right? And then another variation. Okay, let's mute everything here for a second. And let's add a bass voice. Now for this, I'm going to use the tom module, also from the VCV Drums. I will send this already to the mixer. I can name this bass. And what we will do, instead of triggering it with the sequencer, right, we will trigger it at audio rates and create a voice out of it. So what we will do, we will use the VCV VCO. Just for now, I will take the frequency all the way down and I will use the square output or the pulse output to trigger the tom. Right, so now we still have individual notes, individual hits, but when I start raising the frequency of the VCO, we will start getting a steady tone. Right, and now the pitch of the VCO will dictate the pitch of this voice. Right, so we can tune it, for example, to G1. If I right-click the frequency and enter G1, this will be tuned to G1, and the parameters of the tom will change its timbre. So if I take the tune right all the way down to make it nice and bassy, the sweep all the way up to make it crunchy, the attack all the way up to make it noisy. Right, now we can use, for example, chorus, the electric ensemble from flag, to change up the sound a bit. Right, and actually before we do anything, let's send this also to a filter. I will use the one from Surge, just so it's not too much on our ears all the time. Right? So for now I will take the mix of the chorus all the way up. Oh yeah. Right, we can use, for example, the VCO itself to modulate as a modulation source, to modulate at audio rates, the drive, for example. Right? The drive of the chorus. Right, we can also modulate the spread, let's say with a square wave. Very nice. Now let's take the mix down to about a half. Right, again, without, and just add it in. Right, so we have an interesting bass voice from this tom module. Let's change the filter also a bit. I'll take the gain a bit down, but add drive. Oh, to make it a bit more crunchy. Right, and now there are a few things I would like to do. First of all, to add some movement to this, we can use the kick to control its timbre and volume, sort of sidechain it. And for this, I would like to use the full dynamic range of the kick together with the accents and the delay. So what we will do, we will use the VCV simple mixer, how is it called? Just the mix here. Right, I will use once the kick and then the delay from Tap Dancer, both channels, why not? Right, so now we are mixing them. I will use green cables because I'm going to use this for modulation. Now I'm going to send this to an envelope follower. This will be the follow module from Bog Audio. This one here, and it will convert this audio signal that we can then use it for modulation. Let's unmute the kick and the delay for this. Right, and let me show you this also on the scope. Let's put this here. Right, so the mix here will go to the envelope follower and then to the scope. I will take the gain a bit up. Right, so now you can see, right, we get a signal that follows the amplitude of the kick together with the accented hits that are louder, and also the delayed signal, which is softer. Right, and now this we can use to control once the filter cut off, so the filter will close when the kick and the delay are loud. Right, so in the filter from Surge and all of the Surge modules, we have this modulation matrix. I just click the input I want to use and then add negative modulation in this case. Right, and we can do this also to the gain for the volume. Oh, yes. Right, so now we get interesting movement in the bass by using the signals from the kick and the delay, which is sometimes more interesting than just plain old side chaining. Let's unmute the hi-hat also and enjoy this for a second. Very nice. Right, now I want to add another rhythmic layer to the bass. For this, I will use the Euclidean sequencer from Count Modula. Again, I will use the clock, the multiplied by 4 clock to drive it, and I will also connect the reset, so later on we can reset everything. Right, and let's set a sequence with a length of 12 steps, but we will only have 5 hits. Right, so length of 12, 5 hits. Right, let's now reset everything so everything will be in sync. And now we will use this sequence to add a rhythmic layer to the filter, and we will do this with an envelope with the ADSR from VCV. And we'll use the sequence to gate it. Right, and this will modulate the filter cutoff. Let's make it snappy first of all. Right, and again I click the slot I want to use and then add in this case positive. Oh yeah. Positive modulation. So we have another rhythmic layer. Let's add even another layer to this, again with Prince of Perception. The delay, sync it with the clock. Right, using it again as parallel, so I will use the left output of the filter, a copy of the left output, and this will go also to the mixer already. Right, again mix all the way up, because again we have already the dry signal, dotted eighth. Again use the kick to duck this delay. Just send it to the duck input and then duck all the way up in this case. Add some high pass. Maybe more feedback. Also here we can add some send reverb, so let's call this bass delay and then add some reverb. Oh yeah. Very nice. Okay, now one more step before we move on. I would like to use the sine of the VCV VCO that we use to drive the tom. I would like to use it as a sub bass as well to add even another layer of bassness to this. So first of all, I will use Oppressor from Flag, which is again a great module to add side chaining. Right, so again I will use the kick and I will use the sine from the VCO. Oh yeah, let's call this sub. I hope you are with headphones or with good speakers with a nice woofer, range all the way up. So now this sine wave is also side chained. I can solo it. Oh yeah, it's also side chained. And it's subtle, but it's there. If I take it out, right, the bass is gone. Very nice. I can also lower maybe its level a bit. Very nice. Okay, now let's mute everything again and work on another voice. We will add something a bit more melodic. For this, we will use the shift register, the new shift register from VCV, the sample and hold analog shift register module. As our voice, we will use the rim shot module, again from the VCV Drums collection. And again, we will trigger it at audio rates, so we will use another VCV VCO. Also here, the square output or the pulse output will trigger the rimshot at audio rates. In this case, I will tune the VCO an octave down. By default, it's set to C4. If I right-click it and I hit C3, this will take it an octave down. I will use already the VCV filter, right, just so it's not so harsh. The rimshot will go to the filter, and I will use a low-pass filter. Right, so already we have our voice. Now let's do this. I will use another clock output, and I will again set it to be multiplied by 4. You will see soon enough also why. I mean, we have already one, but I'm going to use a dedicated one. Right, and we will use also an envelope, another ADSR envelope. This envelope, if I zoom in a bit, this envelope will again control the filter. Again, let's have it nice and snappy. And again, I will use this second clock to trigger it or to gate it. Right, so we have something a bit more percussive maybe. Right, and now let's do this. I will use the same clock to trigger the first channel of the sample and hold of the shift register. Right, this will trigger it. I will activate the randomize or the random function. So now the buffer of this module, the actual channels are filling with random voltage. We can also set the range here in the right-click menu. Let's go with 0 to 1, so we have 1 octave. I will also use a quantizer. You can see already I have the notes of the sort of C minor, I guess, C, E flat, F, G, B flat on the quantizer. And now I will use output 5 of the shift register, and eventually we'll have a 5-step sequence, right? So channel 5, pitch will be yellow, we'll go to the quantizer and also to our voice. Right now, as it is now, we just get random notes all the time. Right, but if I feed back the output of channel 5, I'll feed it back to channel 1. Oh yes, we have a repetitive 5-step sequence. So again, all the channels are filled with random voltage, but now I'm just looping. I created a loop point from channel 5. Right, so now we can add more movement to this voice. So first of all, let's use a copy of this voice to trigger another layer, and this will be with the crash module, also from the VCV Drums. Right, I will use a copy of the rimshot to trigger the crash module. Just the voice itself, you will see it works. Right, I will also want to crossfade between them, so I will use the fade module, which will be here, the crossfade module also from VCV. Once we will use the rimshot, and once we will use the crash, and this will go back to the filter. Right, so now all the way left is the rimshot, all the way right it's the crash module. Right, and now let's use the quad LFO from Surge to add movement. I already have all of the channels set to random and bipolar. Right, so they will output smooth random signals. Right, so first of all, we can use this to modulate the crossfading, also the tuning of the crash, the tuning of the rimshot. Let's again use a delay to add movement. Again, I will use Prince of Perception, sync it with the clock, use 8th dotted, again use the kick to duck this, to duck the delay. Right, this will go already. To the delay, maybe add some high-pass filtering. Very cool. Add some reverb. So let's name this first of all Sick and add some reverb here. Right, and now I can use another channel of the LFO, of the random signal, to pan, to modulate the panning of this voice. Right, maybe make this quicker. Very cool. So we have something melodic, and now we can add also movement to the clock. And this is exactly why I used another channel of the clock, another channel to have the same multiplication, because now we can add, maybe I will just open the filter a bit. We can add swing. Right, but we can also modulate this. So the clock has also an expander. In the right-click menu, I can add expander. And now we have CV inputs for the swing. And for this, I will use the LLFO from Bog Audio. Take the scale all the way down for a second. And this is clock number 2. So the LFO will go to the CV input of the swing of clock number 2. Let's add some modulation. Right, and you can see we have modulation on the swing, make it a bit slower. So now also the clock has movement just for this voice. Right, let's listen to everything together. Oh, yes. Very cool. Right, so we have a nice patch going on. Of course, we can add more and more things to this, but I think this video is long enough and this patch is already quite big. But I did add some performance controls actually that I want to show you. So the first thing I did is I added a few buffer toggle modules from Sequoia so I can mute and unmute voices together with the clock. Basically, we have a clock input and you can use any clock division you want, and only together with the clock, the voices that go or the audio that goes through this module will be muted and unmuted according to the envelope. So you can also prevent clicks and all sorts of things. Now, in order to arm this, in order to do this, I use the pulses module just so I can map them to the patch master module. So for example, I can bring in and out the kick. Right, and again, this will happen only together with the clock. The same with the hi-hats. Right, sorts of like clip launching in Ableton or Bitwig, if you will, and the bass. Right, I also added a sort of a macro controller to the decay of the hi-hat. Right, another thing I added here, I used the groups inserts here on the mixer. So what I did, I sent the kick. You see, kick goes to group number 1, and also the bass. All of the bass voices channels are going to group number 1, and then this group I sent to a high pass filter together with the unmeld and meld modules. If you are interested in a short video just about this, let me know. I will do my best. But basically, you can like this send inserts or send channels through effects. In this case, high pass filtering. Right, so I have also a high pass. I also have a macro controller to the filter of the bass. Right, and again it goes through a delay there, and also to the filter of the sequencer. With the rim shot and the crash, if you remember from before. Right, so I can bring voices in and out together with the clock. I can change a few parameters with a few microcontrollers. I'm going to play with this a bit if you want to stick along. Thank you again for watching. Consider joining our community on Patreon and Discord. I hope you enjoyed this video. Cheers.